Welcome to In the Arena of Success. This podcast is where courage meets opportunity. I'm your host, Henry Biemann, and every week we step into the arena with visionaries, innovators, and trailblazers from all walks of life. We dive deep into the heart of success and uncover the strategies, the struggles, and the unwavering spirit of those who overcome. The real question is, are you willing to step into the arena and fight for your success? Because in this arena, success is not a destination. It's a journey, and it starts right now. All right, we have Lieutenant General Robert Caslen on the podcast today. He has been an extraordinary leader throughout his career. He's commanded in the Army at all levels, has led troops in combat in both Iraq and Afghanistan, was the Superintendent of Cadets at West Point, and follow-on has had several positions in the civilian career field of academia with the University of South Carolina, University of Central Florida. And sir, it's an honor to have you on today.
Henry, honor to be with you.
Well, so I start all of my podcasts with the first 6 questions being the same for every guest. And the first one of those is, what is your hometown and what is it known for?
Oh, my hometown is Vermont, and it's noted for Jay Peak ski area.
Okay, so snow skiing.
Yeah.
That's not something we're used to here in Mississippi.
So in high school, I was on the ski team. I'm sure they don't have ski teams in Mississippi.
No.
I did everything. I did to include ski jumping, if you can believe that. I didn't, go down there. Ooh.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So do you prefer cats or dogs?
Well, I like them both. I grew up with dogs. I've had cats in the house, so I prefer them both. I love them both.
What kind of music will people find you listening to?
Oh, the blend on Sirius XM. That's easy listening.
What is currently on your reading list?
Oh, I'm going to night school to get my doctorate, and the current course I'm taking is finance and accounting, and the book we have is 776 pages. So that's on my reading list. Oh.
That makes up your leisure and non-leisure reading right there. 700 pages. Yeah. Whew. So moving forward, who is the most inspiring person in your life?
My wife. Well, she's my sweetheart. She put up with me all these years.
How long have y'all been together?
47 years.
Wow, that's incredible. That's an amazing story.
I love her more today than I did 47 years ago.
Man, that's awesome. And leading off of that, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Never quit. Hang in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hang in there. Hang in there.
Well, that's a great segue into your story of hanging in there and persevering. When, in your mind, does your story start?
Well, I'm the son of a mother and father who are both second generation Italian, 100%. So I'm 100% Italian. My name used to be Casalingo. My grandfather went through Ellis Island, came here, and changed the name from Casalingo to Caslen. He married a Cantoni, and my mom was a Casalingo, and a Campagnoni, and then my father was a Casalingo. So I'm second generation Italian, but still 100% Italian. That's kind of where it all started. My dad was a World War II veteran. He, after World War II, went and got his degree and then got into teaching, and he was a principal of an elementary school. And he got fed up with being a teacher in school, so he and mom went on a ski vacation, and he decided to get out of the school business, and he bought a ski lodge up at Jay Peak ski area in Vermont, and he dragged his 4 sons with him, and I was in middle school at the time, so I did my high school years in northern Vermont. And I just found my niche up there. I was really good. So I did a lot of leadership type stuff. Like I was president of the student body and president of a club, captain of the football team, co-captain. So, I really enjoyed and did a lot of stuff out there. That kind of whet my appetite for leadership, and I got recruited to play football at West Point. So I figured, and that was during the Vietnam War, believe it or not. And all my teachers, most of my teachers, found ways not to go to Vietnam. So they all tried, believe it or not, tried to talk me out of going to West Point. They said it's a baby killer school. So I said, this got great opportunities, and I have no obligation for the first couple of years, so I might as well just give it a try. And I kind of like all that's not the Army stuff, but I like being outdoors and I like leading, and I kind of found my niche and enjoyed it.
If you were used to the northern winters of Vermont and being outdoors, the transition into the Army was probably a pretty seamless transition from the start.
Yeah, no, I was not one to sit behind a desk, and my grades in high school were not all that good, so I was more comfortable in the outdoors, but I had to learn pretty quick on, how to get my academics in order.
So you make it to West Point, and at what point during your West Point career did you decide the branch of the Army that you were going to go into?
I picked infantry. It's known to be the toughest and the most challenging. And I said, if I'm going to be in, I'm going to be all in. And I don't want, I want to be at the tip of the spear. So everybody else in the Army, in the Navy, in the Air Force, they support everybody supports the Army because they're at the tip of the spear, and everybody else in the Army supports the infantry because they're at the tip of the tip. So, I mean, if I'm in, I'm all in. I'm not going to be back there, hoping everything goes well. I'll be out there in the crucible, leading our American sons and daughters in the toughest of circumstances.
So was there something innate in you that made you want to be at the tip of that spear and in the heat of the crucible, or was that something that had developed over time?
No, in hindsight, just look back, I've always been a competitive person and always wanted to work my way through challenges and obstacles. And this just kind of seemed the perfect way to do it.
That's absolutely. So as you came out of West Point and you talk about hunting your way through challenges and obstacles, when you make it to your first unit, what were some of those challenges that you faced integrating in as the new leader of 40 or 50 troops?
Well, it was at the end of Vietnam when I finally got to my troop assignment, and the Army was in shambles. It was a mess. The discipline was terrible. There was no there was no counter drug challenge. Programs that were in place. Everybody was high on some type of drug. There just wasn't. The Army had been broken, and you go back and look at some of those 4-star generals at the time. They realized coming out of Vietnam, we had to rebuild the military. And so I'm one of the junior leaders at that time, along with many of my colleagues and teammates. And we started from our own, what we were responsible for, to take responsibility of the men and women that we were in charge of, build the teams that America expected us to do, and to be proficient and to achieve the highest of standards and don't compromise and settle for anything less. So proud to say that we were part of that organization, part of that timeline, that we had the responsibilities to rebuild our Army coming out of the Vietnam War.
How was that as a young officer growing up in a rebuilding Army? Because a lot of your formative years were amidst a lot of change, and I think that's probably pretty similar to what folks are facing both in and out of the military today.
Well, when I talk about lack of discipline, when we had staff duty officer, we carried 45 pistols strapped around our waist. So that you would never hear anything like that today. But that's what we had to do because, it was tough. But there were always drugs in the barracks, and I did my best to drive the drugs out of there. Our brigade commander would, whenever one of our soldiers was found with drugs, thrown in jail or whatever, he wrote us a congratulation note. I posted on the bulletin board and said, "Hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to drive drugs out of our organization. We're not going to stand for that." And, back then there were no urinalysis and stuff like that. And we had huge racial problems, significant. I said, okay, enough of this nonsense. We're going to learn how to work together and to trust each other. And we learned that through shared hardships together, because you learn what it means to work together and to accomplish things together. And it's not because of your race or ethnicity or faith or no faith or whatever. It's because you are a competent young infantry soldier and I trust you with my life. And that's what we did.
One of the things that you mentioned there is trusting with your life. That's something that's pretty unique to the armed services, maybe law enforcement, firefighters, some of those, service professions. But trust is vital in any organization. So what are some of the ways that you learned to develop and build that trust in your organization?
Yeah, Stephen Covey wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. It's a great book, and it talked about trust in organizations and corporate headquarters. And they just knock out bureaucracies if you have a lot of trust, because you don't have to worry about all the bureaucracy to get things done. Everybody trusts each other, and they know the good and the bad and the ugly, and they're going to work together to make it happen. And they trust each other. So as he looked at trust, he said trust is a function of competence and character. And first thing is, if I want to trust you, I want to trust you because I know you know what you're doing. You're competent. And character is really nothing more than the internalization of a set of values, whether they're moral values or physical values like grit, tenacity, and perseverance. Those are the values that are the glue that really hold things together. But if you're going to live with a set of morals that's contrary to the values of our institution, then I don't care how competent you are, I don't trust you. So Covey was spot on when he said trust is a function of competence and character. A lot of people ask me, well, between character and competence, which one is more important? And character will knock out competence every day. In other words, character is what is, in my opinion, the most important element of trust. Because if you don't have trust, you're ineffective as a leader. Trust becomes, and the building of trust becomes the most effective element in effective leadership.
Absolutely. And I think you see that across the Army organization is developing trust and pushing it as far down the chain of leadership as possible, to where you have a young lieutenant, a young captain, a young sergeant making decisions for people's lives in combat. A lot of trust is placed in people at an early age. What sort of mechanisms did you see employed to develop and to build that trust and build responsibility in really junior folks?
Well, it's really about leadership, because leaders are the ones that establish the standard and achieve the standard and maintain it. And when you have a standard and you have a high standard and everybody understands what it is to be a part of that standard, then competence occurs. And leaders also have the responsibility of instilling within their organizations a set of character traits that you will internalize. They become part of your very essence, so that everybody lives and breathes those particular character traits. At West Point, those character traits are duty, honor, country. In the Army, they're loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And you study them, you understand what they are, and you live them. And quite frankly, when you're faced with a compromising situation, you don't have to think about what right or wrong is. And natural reaction will be the manifestation of what you've internalized. And if those character traits are internalized within you, then you're facing those situations, you will always do the right thing. Now, don't get me wrong, we make mistakes. We're human beings and we'll make mistakes. I have made mistakes in character, and I'll be glad to talk about some, later on if you like, but we do. But making a mistake is really, the way I look at it, is an opportunity to learn and to grow and to become better. It's like breaking a bone. If you break a bone and it heals correctly, the bone is stronger where the break was. If you make a mistake and you learn from your mistake, you'll become better and stronger as a result.
Absolutely. As you were progressing through your career in those junior ranks, lieutenant through captain, maybe even major, Was there an experience where you made a mistake and came back from that even stronger?
Well, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes, but yeah, one mistake is I took in my career path, I took a path that I kind of now in hindsight regret taking. And it put me off the main line of fighting as an infantryman, doing some other type of jobs instead. Because I was thinking about getting out of the Army and I wanted to get some assignments that were going to have to prep me for the corporate world. Then I realized how dumb I was. I should never have done that. And because I really missed the Army and I loved what I was doing. So I went back on track again. That's not a character defect. It's just a judgment defect. Probably the biggest character defect I had occurred after I retired from the Army. I was the president of the University of South Carolina in the commencement of, within a 5-day period of around 15 different commencement activities. In the middle of the pandemic, I asked my speechwriter, hey, I need something to congratulate these graduates about what they had just persevered through in order to achieve this degree. So find something. And she come back and said, I can't find anything. And I said, well, I went back into my deck of quotes, grabbed a quote, I gave it to her and said, put it into a place where I can make a comment about it. Because as a president, I'm the host of all these.
Right. So
she did, and that's the last I thought of it until I read about it in the newspaper that I had quoted somebody else, and I accepted full responsibility. But going back to trust, it had created such a disturbance, and rightly so, by the way, that it was obvious I was losing trust among colleagues, among the board, and among faculty and students. And I said, I lose trust. I'm no longer effective. And I said, okay, it's time for me to leave. So I resigned. People criticized me for resigning. I said, hey, listen, I took responsibility for this. And it is. I said it, I owned it. No, nevertheless, even though the intent was all right and all that, it was just something that I had made a mistake. And I learned from the mistake. I did. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you hit on there reminds me a lot of the way I was brought up as a kid and the way I was disciplined is if I made a mistake, if something along those lines of non-attributional or otherwise, as long as I owned up to it, the punishment was much less severe than if you tried to dip and dodge and get away from the punishment. I know probably some of the worst punishment I ever got from my dad was when I tried to dip and dodge punishment and not accept responsibility for something.
No, to me, that's a sign of character when you accept responsibility for your actions. Not many people in today's society do that. Just look at the political scene that's out there. It's disgusting what's going on. I don't care what side you're on, and no one will take responsibility for anything unless, it shines brightly in their respect.
Right. And what you mentioned about character and accepting responsibility, that I think it needs to somewhat be normalized in our culture to be okay with making mistakes. Throughout your career, were there leaders that you worked with that not necessarily encouraged failure, but enabled failure by pushing you outside of your comfort zone, pushing you out of your limits, and pushing you to try new things that you weren't 100% comfortable with?
Yeah, that's what learning organizations do. They push their organization and the employees in the organization out of their comfort zone. They put them into areas that they're unfamiliar and uncomfortable, knowing that they're going to stretch, probably make a mistake, but they're going to learn and they're going to become better. And when they become better, the organization becomes better. And when you push them into those areas and they make a mistake and they learn from that mistake, your responsibility as a leader is to underwrite that mistake as an opportunity to learn. But you certainly must hold them accountable. And some of these mistakes are serious, like the mistake I made that I talked about. So you are held yourself accountable, but learn from your mistake and then you'll become better. I had a great assignment where I was the senior evaluator of units that rotated through a training center. And these were large units. and I was the senior evaluator. And I'll tell you, that was a laboratory of leadership, because you saw leaders come through there under pressure of all kinds. And you walk into headquarters and you would know right away whether it was a learning organization or not. And those learning organizations, there's all kinds of communication going on: formal communication, informal communication. Young junior soldiers are going up to more senior soldiers, asking the question, and the senior soldier will stop and give them their time and listen to them and answer the question. And when it came time to brief the boss, everybody wanted to brief them because they want to show off what they were doing. And and you knew right away, because as soon as they were briefing the boss and the boss responded, he was edifying and lifting them up and encouraging them and pushing them to get out of their comfort zone so they can learn. And the key thing was, those great leaders, they underwrote any mistake that was made as an opportunity to learn and get better as a result. But then there were headquarters that you walk into, and some of those headquarters were like ice. Everybody's sitting behind their computer screen, no talking whatsoever, and they're only doing exactly what they're told, nothing more. And when it came time to brief the boss, you knew exactly why, because he was ripping them apart and embarrassing them and tearing them apart in public. And it created a cold climate, an atmosphere that the boss would never tolerate a mistake. And when you're in those no mistake atmospheres and no mistake clients, nobody will exercise initiative, because all they will do, if they know they're going to make a mistake, is going to be ripped apart by the boss. So they're going to do only exactly what they're told and no more. And those are organizations that are average, and they never get any better, because nobody will exercise initiative to expand and grow and learn. And I saw that over and over and over again, the great ones and the not so great ones. And the whole thing about it was how that leader encouraged subordinates and underwrote the risk of a mistake as an opportunity to learn instead.
That's definitely got to be a unique experience to get to watch that from the outside looking in. And I can see a lot of leadership lessons learned, garnered from an experience like that of watching folks. So as you're watching these things unfold, how would you relate to a junior soldier in one of those organizations who is in a cold environment? What are some of the steps that someone could take? How can you as an individual thrive in maybe not so great of an environment?
Just hang in there. The law of averages says you'll soon work for a great one. So just hang in there. But seriously, I mean, if they find themselves in some of those environments and do what they're told, and you can. The beautiful thing about leadership is you learn leadership from great people, but you also learn leadership from people that are bad leaders.
Yep. Just like we talk about learning from failure, I've probably learned as much, if not more, from bad leaders as from good ones.
Yeah.
So one of the parts of your story that I think is really inspiring and really powerful is the story of 9/11, and it really keys in on your heart and passion for service. Tell us a little bit about how that day unfolded, because I know you had kind of been waffling back and forth between staying in the Army or getting out. You were a colonel at that time, working in the Pentagon. How did that day unfold, and how did that shift your future in the Army?
Yeah, it's one of those days that you'll never forget. You'll always remember where you were on 9/11. Yeah, so I was a colonel, and I was finished my brigade command. I was in a joint assignment in the joint staff. So I had my office on the outer corridor looking out into the parking lot. And I was on the first floor, just down the hall from where the chairman of the joint staff office is, and right below where the secretaries of all the services and the Secretary of Defense was. So when the first plane went into the World Trade Center, everybody clicked on, all the news networks clicked on, and they were watching what was going on and all that. And we all were standing there when the second plane went in, and we all saw that, if you remember. And I had a TV in my office, and there were a bunch of folks that were in my office watching the news. As soon as the second plane went to the World Trade Center, I said, well, next plane's going into some command and control site, not knowing that I think 18 minutes later it was the Pentagon that it went into. And I happened to be where the plane went in, two sides over. And the way they built that Pentagon, as full of concrete as it was, I did not hear or feel a thing when the plane went into the Pentagon itself. I was two sides over. That's how solid the Pentagon was. But nevertheless, all the alarms started going off. We're trying to gather and try to assess what happened. They all wanted us to evacuate the building. We evacuated the building, and I was a deputy to a 1-star admiral. And I told them I would try to get a head count of all the people, make sure everybody's identified and safe and secure, which I did. And then they all said, "Well, just leave and go home." I said, "We're not leaving." I actually walked around the perimeter and watched the Pentagon burning. And as a matter of fact, if you look over my shoulder, the picture up there, I'll describe it to you because you can't really see it, but it's a picture of the Pentagon where the plane went in with the smoke that came up there. My friend took that picture, and then when he developed it, he realized what he actually was looking at. It was a very clear day on 9/11, but when the smoke from the Pentagon was billowing up, it kind of obscured the Pentagon itself. When he took the picture, somehow, some way, the smoke separated, and it created a ray of light that shone right on the Pentagon itself. But what it was shining on was on the 4th floor or the 5th floor, I can't remember, on the outer office was a general officer's office. And all general officer's office, they have the American flag there. And his office collapsed. But what didn't collapse was the American flag because it was on the other side of the office. So when he took the picture, that ray of light was shining in the middle of the fire, in the middle of all the smoke on the American flag. Symbolically, it's really, you can really make a great story of that. But I've always had that picture. I've taken it with me to Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, to Iraq, to Kuwait, every place. I went over there in the 9/11 fight and the post 9/11 fight. I brought that picture with me to understand the why of who we were and why we were doing what we were doing. And so going back to 9/11, so we're standing there watching the Pentagon burn, and I said to those that were with me, I said, "Life as we know it's going to change." And I said, we just can't stand here and watch this thing burn. We got to help out. I mean, so we said, 3 or 4 of us said, we're going to go back into the Pentagon. So we went back to the Pentagon, and all the security guards were out there saying, "No, you can't come in." I said, we got to go in. He said, "You can't come in." So we tricked them. We went around them. Another security guard said no. We went around him, and there was no security guard at that entrance, and we snuck in. So now we're back inside the Pentagon, and we're doing all kinds of things just to try to fight the fire. One of the guys with me was a Navy captain. Everybody in the Navy, if you're on a boat and you get attacked and you have a fire, everybody knows how to fight a fire on a Navy ship. He did too. He went outside and grabbed one of these smoke detectors from a fire truck, went back in the building and started measuring the degree of smoke where it's harmful. Then he started kicking people out. There were guards there that were still in their guard posts. He was kicking them out. He went into Secretary Rumsfeld's office, opened the door. Rumsfeld's got a meeting, smoke all over the place, puts the smoke detector down and said, "Mr. Rumsfeld, you are putting your life at risk right now because of the smoke that you're inhaling inside your office." So Rumsfeld picked up and moved and went someplace else. We're turning off all the hot dogs from the restaurant fryers. And then we started helping out, with the casualties and evacuations and things of that sort. Then I got pulled away, and they wanted me to stand up the command center so they can establish communications with the White House with President Bush in Air Force One, and which we did. So I stayed there probably till 10 o'clock or so at night. 9/11 was Tuesday. I bought a brand new Ford F-150 pickup truck on Saturday, and I parked it. I want to park it as far away from anybody else so that it's not going to get dented. And it was 100 yards parked from where the plane went into the Pentagon. I knew it was going to be a wreck. So I called my wife and I said, "Honey, you might have to come pick me up, but let me just walk out there." So I walked out there. It's late at night, and I'm walking past airplane parts, see my truck up front, fire truck next to it. It's all covered with soot. I didn't know how bad it really was. I started wiping the soot off and God must have put a hedge of protection around it because there was not a scratch on it. And there was an airplane tire right next to my truck on the ground.
Wow.
So if anybody says it wasn't an airplane, I could prove them wrong with my own eyes. I saw an airplane tire for sure. So any, conspiracy theory that it was something else, it wasn't. Anyway, that was my 9/11 day experience.
Wow, that's incredible. That has to be one of the most powerful stories that I've heard in this podcast. And you had already mentioned how you felt the drive to be back with troops, and I'm sure that strengthened that resolve and helped solidify your decision to stay in the Army at that point.
Oh yeah, I did. My when I was a brigade commander, my immediate boss was the assistant division commander, and he was now commanding the 10th Mountain Division, and he got alerted to go to Afghanistan, and he was looking for a chief of staff. I said, "Sir, send me." So he says, "I do. I want you." So he yanked me. I don't know how he worked it, but I got relieved from my duties and responsibilities in the Pentagon, and I got sent to Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division. Early on in the fight, they didn't have no 3-4-star headquarters yet. It was just a 2-star headquarters for the entire country, and I had the honor of being the chief of staff up there.
Wow. What were some of the experiences you had in your junior years coming up that prepared you to be successful at that level?
Well, ironically, this will be a surprise. When I went to Command General Staff College, I stayed another year to get my master's degree in operations research, and I'm glad I did. I mean, I'm disappointed I took another year away from troops, but I'm glad that I took this assignment because operations research teaches you how to think, not what to think, and it teaches you how to think methodically. And it really changed how I think and address challenges, issues, and things of that sort, and how to build a big picture understanding, and create the vision and the mission statement to support it. So I give a lot of credit to the education. That's one of the beautiful things of our military, is that they are passionate. Our militaries, all services, are passionate about leadership development. And leadership development is really a function of education and experience. You go into an assignment, you have education, like infantry basic course. You have education, then you go and you go into practice. And then you come back out to the career course, more education. And the education is to enable you to reflect on what you did and what you learned from it, and then to be educated to prepare you for the next level of responsibility. And that's the beauty of what the military does in its leadership development programs. It gives you the education to develop you, and then it gives you the experience to learn and to put it into practice and become stronger, better as a result.
The thing with that really stuck out in my mind is how you're talking about the different levels of Army leadership and education teach you how to think more so than what to think. And I would imagine that carried over and had a significant influence on your time as the superintendent of West Point.
I was set up perfectly to assume responsibility as superintendent of West Point because I had just come out of 22 months of an assignment in Iraq. I was a senior commander during the drawdown and stayed for 22 months afterwards. I actually wrote a book about it, and someone has just agreed to publish it, The Drawdown in Iraq. You can buy the book and you can read the story then. But when you're in those really complex, ambiguous, and volatile situations, it really helps and prepares you for what are the necessary skills that the next generation of junior officers, what do they need to be effective as junior officers? And what are the leadership development programs that are necessary for them to be successful? And, and before that assignment, I had leadership development responsibilities at Fort Leavenworth as a commander of the Combined Arms Center. Before that, I was in Iraq during the surge in northern Iraq as a division commander. So all of those experiential learning opportunities solidified a set of values that I felt were essential for success. And I realized, we develop leaders at West Point with three pillars. We have actually four pillars. We have a military pillar, which teaches you military skills. We have the academic pillar, which teaches you the intellectual skills. You have athletic pillar, which teaches you the athletic skills. And we also had a character pillar, but we had no character development program. So we really got after the whole idea of developing how do you develop character? Because up to that particular point, character was nothing more than something you learn from osmosis. You can learn it from osmosis, particularly if you're in a culture and you're embedded within that culture, and that culture embraces those values. But how do you develop one's character? And so we came up with a character development program, which is still in place today, and it's even better and stronger as a result. So one thing I'm very proud of the fact as a superintendent is realize how important character was for all the reasons we had spoken about previously, how important character was to be an effective leader, and how do you develop that character? West Point brings young men and women from across the nation, and each one of those young men and women have a set of values they've internalized from their families, their friends, their high schools, their sporting activities, whatever. Some of those values are consistent with the values of our Army and the values of duty on our country, and some are not. So how do you develop those values that the Army embraces that are essential for effective leadership and successful leadership?
So what are two or three of the other key characteristics that enable someone to be successful? We know trust is going to be one of your top ones, but what would be two or three others that would go along with that?
Yeah, a lot of people think of character from the moral standpoint, and I applaud integrity and honor and those sort of moral value sets. But I also really think that, particularly in the military, the values that really achieve success beside moral character are the physical attributes, like perseverance and tenacity and grit, and just that will to never quit, to persevere under the worst circumstances, where everybody's looking to you, they are Miss or Mr. Leader, and then you can't turn away because you're in the crucible and these people are depending upon you with their lives. And you've got to stand up and move forward. You got to take the punch and move forward and keep moving forward. And so that's a skill set of values of tenacity and grit, I think, that are equally important for the character development as the same values of honor and integrity.
For sure. How do you develop that?
Normally it's developing from being a part of a team that has an incredibly tough culture, and you have a desire to be a member of that team, a contributing member, and you commit yourself to develop yourself physically and morally and emotionally to equip yourself so that you can be a part of that team. Just think of the SEALs or the Rangers, these elite groups that are out there. Let me make a point in the midst of all this, though. When I was superintendent, we had a rugby team, and they were tough and they had great tenacity, but they also had a subculture. And within that subculture, every week they would publish among themselves on email a newsletter that would just rip apart, particularly our female cadets, our women cadets, by name. And then they were disgusting. It was disgusting just to read it. It leaked out. And when it leaked out, you realize this team had a subculture. So as much as teamwork will build that culture of tenacity and resilience, if it has a subculture with the values that are not consistent with the institutional values, we have to know that. And we have to rip that apart, because you can't have subcultures out there that have values that are contrary to institutional values. A lot of the subcultures are good because they have values that enhance the institutional values. Rangers and SEALs and guys and women like that are examples of that. But you really got to be careful on some of these, because they can go off on a tangent like the rugby team did. we disbanded the team, fired the coach, and then put all of those young men into developmental programs, character rehab and development programs. And they spoke very highly of their experience, the fact that they were held accountable. And then that's a great example of being held accountable, learning, becoming better, stronger. And they were some of our best men who were advocates of character after they had gone through that experience.
One of the things that kind of stands out there is the sense of belonging that folks have, both in the military or in any organization. It's the sense of belonging that seems to help drive you or call you into developing that passion, that commitment, that dedication that it takes to develop perseverance.
Yeah, and that's what shared hardships does. That's what the crucible does. It puts you in a situation where you're dependent upon your brother or sister, and you develop a bond and brotherhood that's even stronger than your own blood brother or sister. Even today, I'll give you an example. Every summer, the football players of my class, the 6 or 7 of us that stayed there for 4 years, we get together and go golfing for a week. We rotate at each other's house. So we're all going to Minnesota here in next month. We're going to play for the guy up there that lives up in Minnesota. We're going to play there. Last year we were up in North Carolina. The year before that we were down here in Florida. But that's a brotherhood.
Right.
It's the brotherhood that of shared hardships of going through all that. And we went through a tough, ugly season. And but it wasn't the fact that we had an ugly season. It was the fact that we went through it. And we successfully went through it. Not that we were successful, but we completed it, and we learned and became better, and they ultimately got better. But that type of bond that you had mentioned creates a brotherhood and a sisterhood that's even stronger than your own blood brother or sister.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a really good segue, sir, into your first book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's called The Character Edge: Leading and Winning with Integrity. Dr. Mike Matthews, this is one of our civilian professors in behavior science leadership department, just a super guy. I got to know him real well. And about a week before I left West Point as a superintendent and retired, he says, "Hey, would you be interested in co-authoring a book with me?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "This is a book on character." He said, "Well, count me in." So he wrote all the theory, and he had me write all the stories. So he got some stories in there too. But it's a pretty good book. It actually got some really, really positive reviews, and it's still out there. Matter of fact, the Command General Staff Center just got 30 of them, and they advertise them and sell them and stuff like that. So.
Well, sir, I really appreciate you coming on to, and spending some time with me and sharing your story and sharing your advice. Any bits of parting advice for the listeners before I let you go?
Let me just say, I wasn't the smartest guy in high school, even at West Point, but after I graduated, I developed a habit to read, and I really fell in love with reading. And reading is like continuous education for the most part. So I encourage your listeners to get into a habit of reading if you're not already, and because there's so much great books and ideas that are out there. So reading and continuous education, I would encourage as well. Like here I am, I just turned 70 years old, and I'm in the middle of my doctorate. So people say, "What are you gonna do in your doctorate?" I go, "I don't know. We'll see." But I'm loving it. I'm really loving it. I'm learning a lot, except the one course I'm taking now, finance and economics, is kicking my butt. But that's all right. We'll get through it. I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. We may not recommend reading the 700-page tome of finance and economics. Like The Speed of Trust, that's a must-read on every leader's bookshelf. What are some recommendations that you have?
I got a list of books. Let me rattle them off to you. Once an Eagle, We Are Soldiers Once and Young by Hal Moore, Band of Brothers by Stephen Ambrose, Undaunted Courage, another Ambrose book.
It's a good one.
Yeah. The Killer Angels.
That is
The
on
story-
my to-read list. The Killer Angels. General Buchanan recommended that I read that book.
Yeah, I'm heading up there tomorrow to Gettysburg. I'm taking a unit through there. Here's a book that changed my life. His Needs, Her Needs.
Oh, yes.
The way a woman thinks and the way a man thinks are different. I didn't realize it. So the needs of a man are different than the needs of a woman. And if you are growing up in your relationship and you want to see where you fit from other people's perspectives, read His Needs, Her Needs by William Harley. It's a great book. Changed my life, I told you. I'm happily married 47 years. So there's some books to read.
That's a great list. Well, sir, thanks again for joining us, and thanks for sharing your advice, and I appreciate your time.
All right, Henry. Great to be with you, and thanks for all you're doing.
Yes, sir. Take care. Did you like what you heard on today's podcast? If so, do me a quick favor and hit the like and subscribe button. That way you'll stay updated on all the new content that I publish. Also, visit me on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and tell me what you want to hear more about. I love to hear your comments. That way I can continue to produce content that you love and enjoy. You can also check out my website, henrybiemann.com.